Good afternoon, everybody. Just to welcome you to BHG Online 2020, the webinar around what good or high-performing organizations do and how they use strengths to develop that. You're very welcome. Please use the live comments. You'll see that Margriet and myself with our earphones on are going to be the air traffic controllers for this afternoon. And our job really is to get you through the webinar, and we'll do several things in terms of that. One is we'll talk a little bit about a positive psychology approach to organizational development, notwithstanding the fact that we have a pandemic with us. So we'll try on the webinar to bring that back to the context of virtual teams as well. The second thing is we'll be sharing tips, tactics, and some examples from our experience about how to use strengths to build great or high-performing organizations. BHG is a Gallup licensed training partner, and we're a training partner for Africa. Everything that we do and that we'll be sharing with you this afternoon, we will also be able to provide online as we're doing with this webinar. You're very welcome to use the live comments to ask questions, to really annoy us, Bev, that you are now probably sitting drinking a gin and tonic in Jeffreys Bay, and we have folk from all over Africa that is dialing in. So again, welcome from our side, Margriet and Yendor. Margriet, I don't know if you want to say hello or do a quick introduction.
Yes, welcome everyone. I see that we've got Angelica all the way from Germany. Thank you for joining us, Angelica. We've got folks from Kenya. We've got folks from Nigeria joining us all the way from Lagos. So we're very excited to really have an African-wide event. And I think it's so fitting, Yendor, is the fact that that we're focusing on humanity at the moment. And what we're going through this together, and I'm so excited to just have everyone on the line. Looking forward to what we're sharing today.
Excellent. Thanks, Margriet. I think if you could just move the slide pack on. Right, so what we're doing today is we're really trying to answer this question: what are the best to do differently through building a strength-based culture? My name is Yendor Felgate. I'm a director of BHG. My top 5 strengths are achiever. For those that are not close to strengths, that means it's an execution capacity. And what we like to do is we like to tick things off a list. And that's what we're going to do this afternoon in terms of completion of the webinar. Deliberative, I'm the person that always has a plan B. Strategic is all about optionality. Learner is what it says on the box. I'm curious about learning and always learning stuff. And then ideation, I'm the type of person that you bring to a brainstorm because I have lots of ideas, and I think I sometimes drive Margriet absolutely mad with those ideas because not all of them are good, but there's energy behind them. And you'll start to see as we go through the webinar this afternoon that I'll be bringing all those strengths and filtering how I actually deliver on the webinar. See if you can spot them as we go along. Margriet.
Yeah, thank you very much, Yendor. So I've got individualization, ladies and gents, as my number 1 strength. I just love to figure out how people think and what really makes them special. Sort of diving into, being a deep sea diver for strength, if you will. I've got learner as well. Yendor and I share that, and we absolutely love just focusing on, especially in times of this, how we can make things better and bring it to our audience, our clients, and our friends. I also have belief. Belief has got nothing to do with religion, but it's got everything to do with values. So there's certain things that I really feel passionate about. I feel passionate about strengths, the environment. And yeah, I guess I can be somewhat stubborn as well and annoy Yendor in that manner. I also have connectedness, so I instinctively feel that when I make a decision, it's got repercussions, and and I just see the big picture. So from a connectedness point of view, that's how that strength plays out. And then I've got maximizer as well. Love to do take things from average to excellence, and I want to build something great. I've got that inner drive to build something great, and I hope that you will experience somewhat of that strengths today as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Margriet, and just welcome to some folk. We've got people from Norway, we've got people based in Liverpool, UK, we've got the odd folk from Cape Town. Fantastic. It's, I think, starting to be almost a global connection around what do great companies do differently. Both Margriet and myself are Gallup certified strength coaches. We do also train the Accelerated Strength Coaching Certification Program, and we have about 150 alumni across the Africa piece. Hopefully we'll bring some of that experience and a little bit of wisdom, if we may, to the webinar this afternoon. Margriet? So what's the agenda? We're going to really try and address three things. Why, we're going to talk about performance excellence and why it matters, and really our approach to thinking about performance excellence. We're going to look at achieving business outcomes using CliftonStrengths, the positive psychology approach that I mentioned. And then we're going to provide you with 5 strategies for building a great strength-based culture. Whether you use Strength Finder or not, you'll find these tactics and strategies, I think, very useful, because what we're trying to, or the message we're trying to bring across is this idea that if you identify what people potentially could be very good at, and you dial up the development and volume of that, you are going to get exponential performance. And that will be the key message this afternoon, underpinning some of the approaches, examples and tactics that we're going to share with you. So let's look about introducing yourself. You don't have to volunteer or shout across the internet, but really we're asking you just to use the chat comment forum and answer these 2 questions for us. What brought you to the briefing today? And at the end of the briefing, what do you hope to know more about? This will obviously give us a bit of guidance as we go through the webinar about the type of touch points and things that we need to emphasize. So we're not going to spend a lot of time here, and please answer as we go along, and Margriet will pick those up as we progress with the webinar. Right, so what keeps organizations and individuals from leveraging their innate talents? The idea behind this is that everybody comes to the workplace with a set of capacities, an internal inherent sense of abilities that organizations can use. But often organizations are set up in such a way that actually prevents people from thriving and leveraging these innate talents. Most people are either unaware or unable to describe their own strengths or the strengths of others. And you can see this very dramatically when you ask people, what are you good at? And so suddenly people become very humble and don't know how to answer that question. Thanks, Bev. We'll certainly get into those tactics as you requested. But if you ask people what they're bad at, they're very quick to tell you, and they can do that in depth because most organizations give you great feedback around what you're not good at, and they take for granted what you potentially could be great at. And so they miss huge amounts of talent development opportunities. Clive, thank you. A learner brought you to the broadcast. Love that. Love that. I think we can certainly appease that. Bev, thank you very much. Organizational culture and engagement, we'll certainly talk about that from a tactics point of view. So why study performance excellence? We think focusing on strengths development leads to excellence, and that's our approach. Areas of lesser talent never develop into areas of strength. So unfortunately, if you want to be that concert pianist, rocket scientist, and go to the moon, you may have to pick one that really links to what you could potentially good at. Unfortunately, we can't be well-rounded in all things to all people. And I think that gives us the reassurance that we don't have to be perfectionists at everything. It takes a little bit of the pressure off. We can be kind to ourselves and play to what we could really be great at. We need other people to know our talents and strengths so that we can become the best that is in us. So some key messages around here is play to what you can be good at, but we can't be even in this period of self-isolation, we can't be Robinson Crusoe on an island. Even Robinson Crusoe needed his man Friday to be able to connect and get the best out of each other. One of the key things, and I think this is a message that's been really reinforced by the pandemic that we're experiencing, is workplace expectations are shifting and continue to do so at such a rapid rate. And so our response cannot be the traditional response where we do gap analysis and try and do skills development and leadership and management in the old-fashioned way, because what employees want and need, I think, is dramatically different. Our view is that there's a tipping point. Hopefully the pandemic peaks and disappears as quickly as possible, but people, once they've got an understanding of working from home and that flexibility, I think it's going to be difficult to put everybody back into Pandora's box. And so how do we see the demands changing? So if we look at the traditional view of what organizations thought, the past was all about my paycheck, my satisfaction, my boss, my annual review, my weaknesses, and my job. And I think that the research shows that this has dramatically changed. It's all about my purpose, my development, my coach, my ongoing conversations, my strengths, and my life. And I think the value in the way that we see work through the pandemic and the fourth industrial revolution, as it starts to appear on the horizon, is going to move us into the future, but right now. And I think organizations, as we've seen them starting to struggle with understanding the impact of the pandemic, are starting to realize that the human connection, notwithstanding the fact that we're working from home, is increasingly become more and more important. So what's the challenge? We often take our most powerful talents for granted, and many of us may not be fully aware of them. So we're going to do a little bit of an exercise. This is a little bit about what we call stand up if you were always, and this will give us some gauge as to who we have on our webinar. You don't have to stand up unless you absolutely want to and you want to stretch your legs as we do that, but just let us know via the live comment section whether this is you or not. So stand up or comment if you always talk to people in elevators, airplanes, and wherever you go. If you are that type of person, then you are perhaps the really annoying person that sits next to me on an airplane and asks me about where I'm going whilst I'm trying to read a book and clearly don't want to be bugged. But that's always a fun way. I envy the people that are able to do this because they just have a natural ability to engage, win others over, so the woo strength and so forth. And all you have to do, as Bakrit says, is comment yes if you're able to. So Bev says definitely yes. Thank you. Woo is number 3, winning others over. Thanks, Bev, for that. Right, Bakrit, let's move on. Stand up if you always have a color-coded or otherwise organized closet. So if you are OCD, and just shout yes. Those that are deliberative, perhaps analytical amongst us, or just well organized. Chantel, thank you for that. Okay. Stand up if you always write down a list of things to do and stick to it, even on the weekends. Okay, so for those achiever amongst us that have those lists, please contribute. All right, so thanks. Woo number 8 there for Roger Stroke. Bev, I think. Okay. Stand up, you always need to pick someone to race while driving. Tyler, thank you. Yeah, you're online. So South Africans, please, you all have to say yes to this one. Mahrit always tells the light-hearted joke, but I think there's a truth to it, that all South Africans are this because we race taxis to every stoplight. And I don't know if you know, from a South African culture point of view, orange means go faster at robots. Green means that you're too late to take off from the intersection. Clive, woo's number 33, it's okay, but sometimes you're out of your comfort zone. Clive, fantastic. You don't have to take on the woo persona if that's not who you are. There are other ways of building relationships depending on your top 10 strengths. Me, for example, I have no relationship building strengths in my top 10, but yet I still think I have friends. I have a long-suffering wife, 3 children that still recognize me and the dogs don't bite. So definitely there's still chance of opportunity there. Thanks, Mafrit. Stand up if you always figure out the plot of the movie before anyone else does and potentially tells them. All right, so some people say no, some people say yes. You're starting to get the sense that, guys, we're all quite unique in our own way. And I think one of the key messages that we bring to the party is one size does not fit all. So when you think about organizations, when you think about engagement and performance, and you have one consistent process to everybody, you perhaps are missing the trick around leveraging people's individual uniquenesses and talents. Thanks, Mafrit. Stand up if you always push the button to remind the elevator that you are there. Love this one, and you see people frantically pushing the elevator button 100 times, thinking that it will come to them quicker. Mafrit has a version of this one. I think she's been told that there is a trick or a secret to getting the elevator to come quicker. Mafrit, I don't know if you want to share that.
Yes, apparently if you push the elevator button once and you just hold it on, then it skips all of the floors and it comes straight to your floor. So apparently that's a trick, and I've had confirmation from many that it actually works.
Well, there we go. You've got your first strength-based tactic about getting the elevator to come quicker. Please try that and let us know how it goes. Thanks. Right, so you'll start to see that, and there was a whole lot of different responses to that. But were you surprised? The reality is you shouldn't be. We all have instinctive ways of behaving. Even though there are times we laugh at these behaviors, like pushing the elevator, when used with intention, they can be a source of engagement and excellence. Everyone is different and can contribute in distinctive ways. That's really the what we call the foundational viewpoint in starting to think about building a strength-based culture in organizations, especially if you want to leverage the talents to improve engagement and performance. So our viewpoint is everybody has talent. We think this perspective changes everything, and strange enough, this is news to the HR community. I'm an HR professional myself, so I think I can laugh at myself when we think, because historically we used to say that only people with talent in the organization is only about 7%. We started to say it's like, the other 93% have ways of positively contributing as well. So in terms of talent, we think it as a naturally recurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be productively applied. So everything in Gallup world is really about intentionality. So examples of talent that may give us some indications of what you bring to the party as an individual is starting a conversation with someone you haven't met before, so that's a clue. Thinking in an orderly or timely manner, that could be deliberative. Taking satisfaction in completing tasks, achiever, consistently aspiring to be the best, the maximizer, seeing patterns in behavior or data, the analytical, being predictably impatient for action, the activator. What we want to do is move talents or potential to strengths, which is, in our definition, the ability to deliver consistent, near-perfect performance in a specific task. So you'll see the great intentionality and performance-based emphasis in the Gallup approach. So when you do your Clifton Strength Finder, there are 34 strengths. We categorize them in 4 areas: strategic thinking, which is the red; executing, which is the purple; influencing, which is the yellow or orange, depending on how you see color; and then the blue is the relationship building. We don't expect people to have a balance between all 4. Some people have dominance in strategic thinking and execution. Others may have more dominance in influencing or relationship building. What we do know is that regardless of the talents you bring to the party, if you have no yellow or influencing talents, you can still achieve an influencing outcome if you use your other talents in a strategic way in order to intentionally achieve that outcome. So for example, if I have no relationship dominance in my top 10, can I still build relationships and friendships with others using, say, my learner, for example? Absolutely. So the nice thing about this is it doesn't matter how unique your profile is, you can operate in all 4 domains depending on how you use your strengths intentionally. Why do we think this is so valuable? Well, yeah, some of the research numbers that you really need to be aware of when you deal with your executives or your clients. So at an individual level, in the best organizations, when compared with their peers, employees who receive strength-based development were found to have 18% increased performance, 10% higher customer metrics, 73% lower attrition, 23% higher employee engagement, and 10% increased citizenship, in other words, commitment to the organization. And these numbers, given some of the business impact around the pandemic and some of the business challenges we're facing, are quite dramatic just by working with people's talents and giving them strength-based feedback. And here are some of the clues about how we go about or start to think about workplace culture. So can all organizations expect this impact? Well, some of the research, the best organizations infuse CliftonStrengths into their organizational culture. So we'll give you 2 types of examples. One organization that did a task, taking employees used through the CliftonStrengths assessment, they got a 7% increase in employee engagement. If we compare that with one organization that created a task, in other words, invested in a complete cohesive strategy for creating and sustaining a strength-based culture using CliftonStrengths assessment, executive coaching, management development and education, rewards and recognition, an aligned employee value proposition and storytelling, they got a massive 23% increase in performance engagement. So I'm just going to stop there because I think there's a dramatic sort of 2 examples here. One organization that did a task and used CliftonStrengths, 7%. Those that built a strength-based culture, 23%. Keeping in mind that over 400 of the Fortune 500 companies in the States use some type of strength-based methodology. There's a dramatic difference. If I had to ask executives, would they buy a 7% increase in employee engagement right now? Most of them would buy into that, notwithstanding that the potential upside is over 23. So what are some of the approaches or suggestions that we can make around embedding CliftonStrengths per se? There are a couple of options around this and their versions of it. You can make a big splash. You can focus on your teams. You can begin with your leaders and managers. And you can work one-to-one. Our suggestion is that it's obviously a combination approach, but you can start anywhere. Some organizations start with a big splash. Some start with a little bit of a pilot project around teams. Some start to think about management capacity around this issue. And then some start with one-to-one coaching, and then it sort of balloons and develops from there. There's no right approach. It depends on your context and the organization you're working with. But the combination of all 4 elements, we think, is important for high impact, especially if you're starting to drive the over 20% that we've referred to. So what are the most important steps for building a strengths-based culture? We're going to take you through the 5 steps that we think are important. Start with leadership. Give employees an opportunity to start thinking about what their talents are. Build an internal network of strengths based coaches, integrate strengths into performance development, and then start to make sure that your internal processes all align to support that. So Angelica says, how is employee engagement quantified in these studies? Angelica, there are many types of approaches to measuring employee engagement. The Gallup approach is called Q12, which is 12 questions around what we think are really important for individuals in terms of motivating them, committing them to the organization, and helping them thrive in organizations. So there are 12 areas that we look at, everything from do managers provide feedback through to do you have a great friendship at work that you can rely on, and that's how we get an engagement score coming out of that. There are many other engagement approaches on the market. You can have a look at that. We think that there's an over 90% overlap across the major employee engagement indices or measurement areas, so whichever one that you take. We're agnostic, in other words, as long as you have an engagement score and you know the areas that you want to work within, we think the approach, the 5 steps that we're going to take you through will work. The big stat or statistic that you need to keep in mind that about 70%, 70, variability in your employee engagement score is dependent on what managers do or don't do. So if you want the big lever in employee engagement, it is your capacity of your line managers to take on what we call a high performance approach to engagement. We think great managers are obsessed with engagement, are high performance and hold people accountable, and are able to develop others. And we'll talk more as we get through the 5 steps. Angelica, thank you. That's a great question, but I suspect it actually is a webinar all by itself. So we'll take that further offline. So we always think start with the CEO or identify a senior leadership sponsor. So when we build a culture, we don't think you can build it from the bottom up. Okay, so that's a bit of a different approach to change management here. We think it's got to be a leadership agenda, and we like to start with executives because they set the tone. In other words, managers and the rest of the organization will follow the leader's example. And I think you have many sort of insights into how you've seen that work. We want to give executives and leaders the right approach so that they can role model it. So some strategies, we're starting with executives and CEOs, is we think strengths is a business strategy. You notice that we started with the impact of a strength-based culture and approach. Executive leadership should share their strengths with others and communicate how they use them. We think that executives need to role model this and actually lead on strengths. And strength-based culture hinges on leadership alignment. You can't expect your managers and employees to take on a positive psychology approach if your leaders think that the best way to lead is by running a sweatshop. Now, this is a tremendously obvious point to make on a webinar, but we see it so often that happens in the organization. Leaders go, oh, we love the strength-based stuff because managers can get more productivity out of employees, but by the way, we're going to continue as business as usual. And that sort of contradictory approach creates more toxicity than is really worthwhile. So we really want to get your leaders to embrace. So some tactical approaches that you want to think about: articulate how the Strengths Initiative is connected to the organization's identity, its purpose, brand, and culture. And the great power question at this stage to ask executive teams is, why should good people work for you? And you'd be flabbergasted. A lot of executive teams don't know how to answer that question, and they come back with the type of response that you really just have to hold your head. They go, yeah, because we pay people. Yes, you do, but so do others. And I think that just getting that conversation going is a valuable way to challenge positively executive teams. Create partnerships with other leaders using strengths. So get leaders to talk to each other. And it's amazing how quickly your silos will disappear. And then infuse strengths into their leadership brand. In other words, good leadership in an organization should be positive-based, positive approach, strength-based. When leaders truly build a culture of strengths, it's constantly top of mind for them. It's the way that they do business. They think about people they are talking to at any given time and consider how their talent DNA is at work. Once we switch the filter or lens onto this approach for leaders, is they're constantly thinking about the power question here. How do I create the environment to get the best out of the people that I lead? And it's the how-to around that where we think strengths really contribute to a performance agenda. And it's that lens that makes sense. Too often leaders and managers in particular think a little bit about what do I have to do as opposed to how do I help others be the best version of them. And here is the litmus test. When I speak to managers and I ask them, what is it like to manage? They tell me it's like pushing a rock up a hill. This approach is about let's level the hill, forget about the rock, and really our job is to get the best out of others. Then management becomes a lot easier. We think that we should give every employee the opportunity to discover their strengths. It's a common language, what I almost call a relationship shorthand between people. Dixon asked the power question, how do you break the ground in getting CEOs, top leadership to buy in when there's no existing coaching culture? Fantastic question, Dixon. The short answer to that in my mind is the fact that you start with the business results about why we think this approach really works. We very seldom go to leadership teams and say, right, our solution is positive psychology, feedback, and by the way, we're going to coach you. Rather than saying, well, are you interested in high performance? Are you interested in engagement? Do you want to develop your people? And do you want to get a bottom line impact? If you're open to that, here's the approach that we suggest. If a leadership team is not interested in high performance, go figure. I mean, what can you do? But that's the starting point in our minds. Thanks, Bafrit. So when we look at employees discovering their own strengths, we really want to infuse strengths into performance conversations. You don't have to do the Clifton Strength Finder assessment to understand what people's talents are. There are clues to talent, much like we did the stand up and sit down. And you can start to see where people really play to their power and energy and show immense amount of energy. Those are the clues to talent. And we want to have them in the conversation. So rather than gap analysis and talking to people about what they're terrible at, let's reinforce what they're great at and help them to develop that space. Employees need the tools and resources to understand how to embed strengths. And we want to look at real behavior, not just words on a page. Some tactics, obviously the Clifton Strength Assessment we think is valuable in this space, from CEO to frontline team leaders to employees. Having an ongoing plan to incorporate new team members. So too often we train people and then we forget about onboarding the new folk, and celebrate your brand with strengths rather than wondering about what you're not good at. I think far too often management is equated with firefighting, resolving queries, solving people's problems, as opposed to how do we get the best out of them. So what do we want to do about embedding Clifton Strengths? It's more than just discovery. We want to use it, and this is why Makrita and myself really enjoy working with clients around Gallup. We want to name them, in other words, understand what you bring to the party. We want to claim them, understand how you use them in the workplace, and then we want to aim them. In other words, how do we intentionally use your power and edge to deliver great results? Lorraine saying also what you can add, offer the CEO to coach him first. Sometimes you may have to do a free session. You need to win him and show him the greatness. Lorraine, thank you. That's a great suggestion. We find that leadership sometimes is a very lonely position to be in. And so to offer him, I'm hoping also her, CEOs out there, the opportunity to engage with what they could potentially do well. They have the same challenge as we do, which is about how do I really get great performance out of others. So what's the goal? So building a positive culture. So if we boost employee engagement and prevent further spikes in attrition by helping managers and individuals alike with strengths, you start to see some dramatic drops, 85% down to 8% in terms of attrition, 32% to 1% in terms of drop in scrap rate, the number of, say, for example, defective parts produced in a manufacturing organization, which is the example here of over 300 employees. So 85% down to 8% in drop in attrition, 32% down to 1% in defective parts. And what do manufacturers always hate? The artisans leaving for slightly more pay to somebody else, and the whole idea of having to rework or scrap when you're doing just-in-time manufacturing. So how did they go about creating a more positive or productive work environment? Well, they introduced Clifton Strength Finder to the employees. They provided strength-based coaching support to employees around understanding their strengths. They required all employees to participate in strength discovery sessions, in other words, understanding their strengths. They built strengths as a common topic for the production floor. And they integrated strengths into conflict resolution, project management, and importantly, collaboration. And one of the things that we think is really powerful around building a culture is that we want our teams to collaborate more effectively. Most organizations that come to us say that how do we get communication How do we break down silos? How do we get people to collaborate better? Well, the answer in this example around manufacturing, I think, is obvious. Profitability increased by a staggering 233%. Profitability increased by a staggering 233% and productivity by 200%, even without increasing the workforce, leading to record revenue gains for the organization. Right, so guys, I mean, the numbers stack up. 85% to 8, 32% to 1, profitability 233, and productivity 200%, just in this example. So just to add to what Dixon and Lorraine are saying, these are numbers that executives are really interested in. And in actual fact, they're so large that they may go, well, how did you do that? I mean, that's amazing. So please use your chat function now to provide feedback on the following to us as we go through. What performance metrics in your organization would a strength-based approach help to improve? How aligned are your senior leaders to create a culture of strengths? And then what barriers exist for your employees to use their strengths every day? Please use your chat button and please share some of the insights around that as we continue with our process. So performance metrics. How aligned are your leaders around the idea of giving positive feedback? And what barriers could exist in your organization around some of the things that we are suggesting? As the guys start to hopefully use the chat button, let's move on. What are the key ways of leveraging the whole strength-based approach once people understand their strengths is to build up an internal network of strength coaches. In old-fashioned change management, these would be almost strength-based change champions. And they would be the resources that people can go to in terms of really getting great feedback. So, all right, so net promoter score, absolutely, we find that strength-based approaches would increase positive customer feedback, and the whole idea around net promoter score. So we could certainly align that with a strength-based approach. So when we think about building an internal network of strength-based coaches, we need to obviously think a little bit about developing those that want to become strength-based coaches, develop that capacity to do so. Their job is to really help develop individual and team strengths and help managers focus on the depth of understanding their strengths. So tactically, how do we do that? We identify coaches, people that have a natural disposition around developing others, to be highly credible and influential partners in this process. You'll find that employees will want a resource that they can go soundboard. You'll see that managers will want to also have that capacity or that support in helping them develop build that capacity to have those great conversations. And so that internal network becomes mission critical. And then, of course, you can use the Gallup approach in terms of additional education and support, and we'll share some options around that at the end. Next, please. So the types of things that you can also start to think about is you can use strength-based or strengths coaches should represent different functional areas. So you spread them across the organization for a full organizational impact. Most strength coaches play the role of a player or coach who may have a role in, say, HR, OD, or be a well-respected manager in the organization. Sometimes you look for influential people rather than job titles. And most organizations start with a small number and then grow as interest, need, and adoption increases. We have discovered that if you start with one team, that tends to go so well that the team talks very nicely or in highly energetic terms about the impact, and then other teams will go, well, why aren't we experiencing that? And so you can go team by team, for example. The role of the coach is to support the manager to use a strength in their role and develop strengths on the team. Time for coaching, it varies. It's really 100% full-time coaches, depending on the type of organization. A number of coaches varies, but a good estimate is, say, one coach for every 20 to 40 managers, to give you a bit of a a span of control there. The next step is really to start to think about integrating strengths into performance management. And this is about having effective coaching conversations that lead to performance and development. There's been a lot of change in terms of what performance management looks and feels like. There's a distinct shift away from only performance management in terms of ratings to one that really thinks about how do I help the individual as a manager to perform better, and how do I develop them? So the emphasis now is much more on the developmental conversation piece, though measurement has not been thrown out. So we don't agree with organizations that say we're only doing performance development, no more ratings. We think it's a combination. The Gallup viewpoint is that we want to develop people, but we also want to hold them accountable for performance. So some strategies. Obviously, strengths we think is a business strategy. We want to embed strengths in performance management systems. It shouldn't be complex. We want to keep it simple. And then we want to think about how people can do what they do best to achieve performance outcomes and business results. This is why sometimes we would advocate with managers is about designing jobs around what people bring to the party rather than be fixated with job descriptions and try and force people into perhaps boxes. So some tactics around that. Your managers must first understand their own strengths. This is mission critical. It's very difficult to lead, I think, a great team if you as a manager don't know what you bring to the party. So first of all, know thyself. Have ongoing conversations, not yearly reviews. Again, mission critical is managers. We encourage managers to talk to their staff. Again, a fundamentally obvious point, but one that we find that managers email their employees rather than spend time talking to their employees. And there's specific ways that we would suggest that managers do talk to their employees. Sometimes it is about providing a solution. Sometimes it's about great feedback. Sometimes it's just understanding how to turn the volume up of the power and edge of people. Lorraine, again, a great contribution. The power of strengths coaching is that we exemplify a selfless and empowering platform for organizations to coach internally. This builds confidence to work with the coach. Yeah, couldn't say well done, Lorraine. A great way of thinking about that. So ongoing conversations, guys. We're going to have to do the human stuff, talk to each other. I mean, go figure. Who knew that it was as simple and perhaps as complicated as that? And then also understand and appreciate your employees' talents and strengths and use this information to uniquely set up each person for success. So a couple of key success factors for managers. One is that we have to care about others in a material and demonstrative way. Two, we're going to have to talk to them. And three, we're going to have to understand them in a way that suggests that we uniquely understand how to develop them. So if you're working with somebody like Makrit who has belief in maximizer, how do we help them turn up that volume to really use her contribution? In our world, Makrit and myself work together very, very often, and the way that tends to work is my achiever connects with her maximizer. So if we have to complete an exercise, if I do a piece of work, I will often ask her to provide oversight to take it from good to great. What a great contribution. When we're dealing with ambiguity and complexity, I'll often check in with Makrit to say, tell me, what is your beliefs intuitively believe around this? What are the boundaries? How far can we push this before it becomes unethical or a place that we don't want to go? So we do use this as checks and balances. And then Makrit often would then connect with me around ideation and strategic. So Makrit, I'm going to bring you in there, and perhaps you can give us some examples of that.
Yes, Yendor, thank you. So I connect a lot with Yendor's ideation. You know, when we are in situations that needs fresh ideas and a fresh way of looking at the situation, at the challenge that lies before us, you know, then Yendor's ideation just comes up with a number of ideas. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to use all of the ideas, but it brings up the momentum, and it keeps up the momentum, you know, and it keeps us from stagnating and falling into the trap of business as usual, falling into the trap of just doing nothing. And it really just, you know, what can I say? It really helps.
Thanks for that, Margriet. That gives you some good examples. Those are the types of conversations you can have at exco level, management level, and when managers can really have those conversations with employees. Understanding that whatever we suggest, you can do this with virtual teams and people working from home as well. In actual fact, we think that conversation now is even more important if you work from home because there's a loneliness attached with that. Right? So some of the numbers again, 3 in 10 workers agree that their company's performance management system helped improve their performance. So only 30% think that the current approach to performance management actually helps them. 95% of managers are dissatisfied with the performance management system. So those managers that own 70% of your employee engagement variability, 95% of them think that performance management just doesn't work. And then 2 in 10 employees strongly agree that their performance is managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. So implicitly, 8 out of 10 people are being switched off inadvertently at work. And I think some of the great numbers that you're seeing around employee engagement and strengths is about switching on the 8, about really getting managers to dial down the 95% and then capture the 7% around meaningful performance development. Meaningful performance development for us is about being able to give great strengths feedback and really give feedback that helps the person as to who they are, as opposed to saying, well, you lacked emotional intelligence, so we're sending you on an emotional intelligence training program. In my case, empathy is number 34. Good luck with that. I may learn some stuff, but if you connect with me around my learner, you'll get a lot more impact around an empathy outcome, as an example. Okay. So we think that mission critically is we need to invest in manager development around leading high performance teams. So the way to think a little bit about that is we think about management now in 3 areas. The ability to establish meaningful expectations. This is role and relationship orientation about how managers should help others. The continuous coaching paradigm, which is about quick connects, the ability to check in a way that's positive, and then developmental coaching. And then, of course, the whole idea about creating accountability, the progress review. Nobody's suggesting that normal management development around plan, lead, organizing and controlling is not important, but the way in which you do that becomes now important. Expectations, this ability to be a great workplace coach, and this idea about creating accountability. And you'll notice the links then to performance, engagement, and development, which are the 3 mantras of the strength-based approach. Right, so Dixon's asking the question, in building the internal network of coaches, is it possible to go for a blended approach, external strength coaches, internal full-time coaches, and using line managers as strength-based coaches? Dixon, great question, and the obvious answer is yes, yes, and yes. So often in organizations, we've experienced that organizations want a blended approach. So they like the idea of change champions and internal coaching partners as a way of soundboarding and accessibility. They like the perspective of external coaches because they bring a broad range of experiences from other clients that could be really useful. And then we think that unless managers go from boss to coach, which is the sort of the great research piece around Gallup's new book around Is the Manager, you're not going to get the full impact. So you can internally coach, you can externally coach, but if the manager keeps breaking down that momentum by acting as a traditional boss, you're not going to get sustainability. So we think that the combination is the 3 legs, Dixon, that you're absolutely talking about. There's power in all those combinations. Sometimes organizations start with external, then migrate to internal, then have a blended approach as they mature. So the balance in the blended approach could be quite significantly different organization to organization. We're also saying to you that as long as it's positive psychology, you can use a multiple methodological approach. In other words, you can use strength-based coaching. You can use ontological coaching. You can use appreciative inquiry. You can use insights, Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, all that good stuff. It's the value of that conversation piece, the ability of managers to have those conversations in a way that brings the best out of others That's the secret X marks the spot or secret recipe that we're sharing with you. So don't chuck everything out and go strength-based. Of course, we'd like you to, of course. But add strengths to your DNA and the great work that you probably, and the foundations that you probably have in place. So thanks, Dixon. Great question. We're running out of time, so I just need to increase the pace a little bit because we promised an hour. So what is the impact of strengths on engagement and performance? We think that if you work with strengths, this is how you do what you do best. This links to engagement. If you do what you do best, you will start to understand that you will be more motivated. This is why you feel the way that you do. You intuitively know this. If you work to your strengths and your talents and you achieve great success, your power and energy just goes up, and that means it drives performance. So that's the virtuous sort of causality link that we like to make. How you do what you do best, why you feel it the way you do, and then the performance that you achieve. So using your chat function, please share a little bit around the following if you can. What's your organization's view on coaching? Oopsie. What types of performance conversations are you having today with your employees? I think there's a final one, Recruit. No, there's only two. Okay, only two. So what are you thinking? Are you thinking about coaching still as a traditional paradigm where it's almost therapy-based? You send people that HR can't fix to coaches to fix? What are the type of performance conversations are you having? Are you only talking to your employees when things go wrong and there's been a problem, or are you having much more proactive types of conversations? Let us know on your chat or your comments, please, as we go forward. So the other thing is that we like you to think about transforming your internal programs. It's important that you want to conduct a thorough audit of your existing programs and practices, and so connect with the entire employee experience or life cycle. So some strategies, really understand what your existing employee experience is. There's no point in having a great employee value proposition that says we want to get the best out of you when every new recruit has to fight for a desk space for IT help to help them to log on and have a terrible onboarding experience. We think that strengths, or this approach, should be woven into each key development touchpoint. And we really want a set of strength-based resources to support coaches, champions, and the overall organizational rollout. So for example, if you work with us, we have digital online support resources that individuals can just access and use. So some tactics around that: order all internal and programs, so make sure that the employee experience is embedded. Transform any programs that exist away from deficit and fixing to much more positive, and be transparent about the changes to programs. So the types of things that we want you to start thinking about is, how do you affirm the decision? You spend huge amounts of energy recruiting the right person. How do you onboard them positively? How do you engage with them? Build strengths and purpose. How do you drive expectations around performance? How do you develop them around a great strength-based career? And then sometimes when they do depart, how can they leave with a positive exit experience? In other words, when they go into the market, they have this net promoter score and say, when I was at, and annoy their new organization by saying how well or good you are to friends, family, and importantly, customers. So these are the 5 steps to building what we think are a great strength-based culture. And you can start taking action today. So what can you do on your own? There's nothing to stop you from having strength-based conversations. You can do the Clifton Strength Finder if you want. Plus, you can also look at what are people bringing to the party? How can I build on the power and edge and the energy that they bring? There are clues to talent. What are they good at? Where does the energy derive from? What are they yearning to do more often? So great clues around that. And you can start to focus on manager development around the conversation piece. How can BHG help you around that? Well, we can give you, obviously we support the Gallup rollout on Clifton Strength Finder, so we can give every employee the opportunity to know their strengths. But we can help with strength-based feedback for your leadership team. You can also think about getting certified, attending our upcoming Accelerated Strengths coaching course, 11th to 15th of May 2020, located in Johannesburg. Guys, we're still running a course at this time. We will keep you in mind if that needs to change depending on how the pandemic goes. A special offer by just being with us today is you can register for a Clifton Strength Finder Top 5 assessment plus an online Understanding Your Strengths program and receive a 50% discount by just contributing this afternoon. For those that want to take advantage of this special offer, you can use the promo code BHG Briefing 2020. You can email the code to info@bhggroup.africa. We will send you a quotation and a registration. The great thing about this is if you're working from home and you have that spare hour or so, you can have a look at your Clifton Strengths for the first time if you haven't done it. If you have done it and you want some more depth, it comes on with a great online education program with all the Gallup resources, from video clips to debriefs to exercises and a deep dive electronic experience that really brings the Gallup Strength Finder 2.0 workbook to life. So that is available to you. In the last 4 minutes that we have time, guys, we can open up to any further questions and answers that we can provide. For those that need to log off and go do other things, thank you very much for being online with us. Chris, I don't know if you have any last comments before we open to our questions and answers.
Thank you everyone for joining us. If you would like a recording of this copy, just let us know, we'll send it to you. And thank you for your questions, your contributions. We look forward to engaging more with you within the coming weeks around remote teams, how to keep the momentum going, how to make sure that your team members doesn't become lonely, and so forth. So keep looking at social media, etc. We will update you there.
Excellent. So questions. Can we get the training slides? They are Gallup IP, but you will get a copy of the webinar. And obviously the slides will be available for you to peruse and have a look at. Unfortunately, not for cut and paste at this stage. So yes, you will access the webinar. It will be sent to you on request, and that's available for you to share with YouTube and your 17 best friends. Thanks, Bev. It's good. Thanks for the feedback. Dixon, thanks for your input. So Fidelis is asking, is it a weakness on the part of a strength-based approach that it doesn't have room for turning weakness of employees into strength, as the strength of some has nothing to add to organizational goals? Yeah, it's an interesting question. So if you have a weakness, we're not suggesting that you ignore a weakness. If you, for example, are an airline pilot and you don't know how to fly an aircraft, clearly that's a problem and you need to be certified as an airline pilot. But to be successful as an airline pilot, to fly effectively, to manage an aircraft of $200 million US, a crew of 20 and perhaps 300 passengers, your strengths will certainly be useful in that context. So you can minimize the impact of weaknesses. You remember that strength is not the same as a skill. If you need skills, please go on the Excel spreadsheet training course that you need. But we think that strengths can be applicable to any organizational context. And Fidelis, where we would perhaps differ from you is that we think that any strength has a great contribution to make in an organization, whether that's empathy, restorative, which I think is a Bishop Tutu strength in my mind, any one of those strengths, all 34 have power and edge that can be really useful in a business context. Right, so copies of the presentation, guys. You will get a copy of the webinar. That'll give you the explanation and a little bit around the slide pack. And then, of course, you're welcome to share the webinar with your network, with your organization, and so forth. And if you feel that you would like our support in chatting to your leadership team around this, we're certainly available to hop online and to share the love, I suppose, in a way that makes sense during the COVID-19 pandemic. So no hugging, but definitely webinar connection. Right, guys, you've got literally 1 more minute to ask any power questions before we have to appreciate that the time is over. You can also use the info at bhg.africa to ask the 17 power questions that are going to strike you. Tomorrow, when you over a cup of coffee, you start to think a little bit about what we shared and you start reviewing the webinar. So we're always open to answer any questions, regardless of whether you want to take up the special offer or not. So guys, it's available to you. info@bhg.africa for questions, discounts, and anything to do with strength-based. So guys, that's it from us. I'm going to now officially mute and we'll start exiting from that point of view. Thank you very much. Godspeed. Good luck.